The interstate was a lonely ribbon of asphalt stretching into the darkness, flanked by the vast emptiness of the American heartland. My mom, sister, and I had been on the road for days, and we were eager to reach our destination. The night was deep, the air thick with the kind of silence that presses against your ears, making you hyper-aware of every creak and groan of the car. Despite the hour, we were well-rested and alert, our spirits lifted by the anticipation of the end of our journey. But as the miles ticked by, our gas gauge dipped lower and lower, and we knew we needed to find a place to refuel. After what felt like an eternity, we saw the familiar blue sign indicating a rest stop ahead. It was the first one we'd seen in over 200 miles, and we were grateful for the chance to stretch our legs and use the bathroom. The rest stop appeared out of the darkness like an oasis, its flickering neon lights casting eerie shadows across the parking lot. It looked like every other rest stop we'd encountered on our journey: gas pumps, a convenience store, and the distant hum of vending machines. But as we pulled in, something felt wrong. A van full of teenagers was already parked at one of the pumps, their laughter and chatter cutting through the quiet night. At another pump, a small gray car sat idle, two young men standing perfectly still beside it. They didn't seem to notice us as we pulled up behind them, their gazes fixed on something we couldn't see. The air around them felt heavy, oppressive, as if it were thick with something unseen. My mom and sister decided to go inside while I stayed in the car, the eerie atmosphere making me hesitant to leave the safety of the vehicle. As they walked toward the convenience store, I watched the teenagers. They seemed uneasy, their previous joviality replaced by nervous glances and hushed whispers. I heard one of them say, "This place is creepy. We can't get the pump to work. Let's just go." Without another word, they piled back into their van and sped off into the night, leaving us alone with the two men. As I watched the men, a cold knot of fear twisted in my stomach. They hadn't moved an inch since we arrived. No casual shifts of weight, no idle gestures, nothing. They stood there like statues, their eyes hidden beneath the shadows cast by the dim lights. The longer I stared, the more my unease grew. Something about them was wrong, profoundly wrong, in a way that made my skin crawl. Minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. My mom and sister finally emerged from the convenience store, their faces pale and drawn. They were walking quickly, almost running, their earlier calm replaced by a palpable sense of dread. As they reached the car, they threw open the doors and jumped inside, slamming them shut with a force that echoed in the still night. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Just go. Get us out of here," my mom said, her voice tight with fear. I didn't hesitate. I turned the key in the ignition, and as the engine roared to life, I glanced at the two men one last time. They had turned to face us, but their bodies hadn't moved. It was just their heads, swiveling unnaturally to fix us with their gaze. And that was when I saw their eyes, dark as pitch and empty. Not just black, but voids, as if they weren't eyes at all, but holes leading into an abyss. The sight sent a jolt of terror through me, and I floored the gas pedal, desperate to get away from whatever those things were. We drove in silence, the adrenaline pounding in our veins as the rest stop quickly faded into the distance. None of us spoke, each of us lost in our own thoughts, trying to make sense of what we'd seen. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing with questions. What were those men? Why did they feel so wrong? But most of all, why couldn't we find any trace of that rest stop on any map? We didn't stop until we reached the next city, a good 50 miles away. It wasn't until we were safely parked outside a brightly lit diner that we dared to speak of what had happened. My mom and sister recounted their experience inside the convenience store, describing how the lights had flickered ominously, how the cashier had stared at them with the same empty, void-like eyes as the men outside. They said the whole place felt cold, as if something terrible had happened there, leaving behind a residue of malevolence. When we finally mustered the courage to look for the rest stop on a map, it wasn't there. We retraced our route, pinpointed the exact spot where it should have been, but there was nothing, just a long, empty stretch of highway. We even asked the locals about it, describing the rest stop in detail, but they only looked at us with confusion, insisting there was no such place on that stretch of road. As the days turned into weeks, the memory of that night lingered in the back of our minds, a shadow we couldn't quite shake. We tried to rationalize it, to convince ourselves it was just a strange, isolated incident. But deep down, we knew better. There was something wrong with that rest stop, something that defied explanation. A few months later, we drove down that same stretch of interstate again, half expecting to see the rest stop appear out of the darkness like it had before. But it never did. The miles rolled by, and there was nothing but empty road where the rest stop should have been. It was as if it had never existed, as if we had stumbled into a place that wasn't supposed to be there, a place out of time, out of reality. To this day, we don't know what we encountered that night. Was it a glimpse into another world? A place where the rules of reality didn't apply? Or was it something darker, a trap for the unwary, luring travelers in with the promise of rest and fuel, only to ensnare them in a nightmare? All I know is that we escaped, but I can't help but wonder, what would have happened if we hadn't? If we had stayed a moment longer, if we hadn't sped away when we did, would we have vanished too, just like that rest stop? Did this story really happen? Or was it just the overworked imagination of a writer? Did we get you on this one? Is it real or fake? Have you heard this story before? Or does it sound like something you may have heard? Or did we just make the whole thing up? You tell us. Comment below. What do you think? I will reveal the real and the fake ones on December 18th.